Finland became NATO's member. Putin is mad. This is what we're gonna talk about today. And hi, I'm Elena. This is my political channel Enough. Welcome to my channel. Mostly my channel is about enough of propaganda, but not just that. And today we're gonna talk about Finland joining NATO. This is the website of NATO. And this is how it happened. So today the newest member, 31st member, 31st ally to NATO, it's Finland. And we can see that article right on the website, but we will learn a little bit more about today. This is actually my video from June of last year. This is how it looks like. It's called Finland and Sweden will join NATO thanks to Putin. Debunking Russian propaganda about NATO. I recommend this video if you want to know more about lots of about what happened and how it was happening and so on. There are lots of myths which isn't true about NATO and about the war between Russia and Ukraine. About Russian aggression in Ukraine, and even some famous people and intelligent people like Mearsheimer or Chomsky said several wrong things about it. They were dead wrong. They were proven wrong. And that's what we're gonna talk about today as well. So there is some idea that Putin was provoked, that NATO did something to make Russia feel feared or anything. But put yourself in the shoes of Finland. Relatively small country, to compare #1 size-wise country in the world, Russia. And by the way, talking about a relationship between Finland and Russia, Finland used to be part of Russian Empire. Then after the revolution in 1917, Finland basically was allowed to leave Russian Empire and become independent country. And also Russia had more than one war with Finland. And again, Putin's propaganda about Russia doesn't start wars, Russia finishing them, it's a lie again, because in history Russia started several wars, and one of them, USSR and Russia, started the war with Finland in 30th of November 1939, when Russian forces attacked Finland. And it wasn't just some minor conflict when 3 people get whacked in the nose, no. Over 25,000 Finnish people died in that war, and 5 times more Soviet people died. About 126,000 people from Soviet Union died in that war. That war alone, 3.5 months. That amount of people died. It was bloody war, and actually Finland basically kicked Soviet butt. Yes, they did lose some territory and so on. They couldn't really win big deal from that kind of country with huge they were outnumbered. Russia had planes, tanks, everything. Soviet Union, I mean. And yet Finland stood up against Russia. Since then, the relationship wasn't all that great, let's put it that way. About relationship between Russia, USSR, Russia and Finland, I'll tell you a little bit more later. For now, I want to show you one of the articles of Wall Street Journal. It's called NATO's Military Decline. As Russia rearms, the West increasingly neglects its defenses. It was published on March 25th, 2014. Which is saying that Putin and his American apologists like to blame NATO. And saying that NATO expanding after Cold War and so on. But Putin was the one who attacked Georgia. Putin was the one who attacked Ukraine. NATO didn't attack anybody. NATO is a defensive alliance. And more than that, NATO did not sign any documents saying that they wouldn't allow any country from Soviet Warsaw Pact or ex-USSR, former USSR, to join NATO. They cannot do that because they are independent countries. You cannot tell independent countries what to do. That's why documents like that was never signed. It never happened. Despite the Putin's propaganda that there is some sort of a promise or anything, nothing officially promised by anyone to anyone. Meanwhile, the Budapest Memorandum was a really official document. It was official document signed by Russia, by Ukraine, by United States, and by UK. When Ukraine give the whole stockpile of nuclear weapons to Russia, in exchange that all those countries gonna protect its borders, never attack Ukraine, and so on. Unfortunately, this article, sometimes you can see it, the whole thing, but now I was a while, and now it's kind of on subscription, so I'll show it to you in my video. Another important thing I want you to see is that most alliance members, and we're talking about that 2014 and 2013, and they even more planning to cut spending and cut presence of NATO in Europe in 2015. And if Russia wouldn't attack Ukraine in 2014, the NATO basically would have been reduced itself to nothing. Most alliance members are also dangerously demobilized. Germany last year announced plans to cut its troops to no more than 180,000, from 545,000 at the end of the Cold War. The French military has shrunk to 213,000 from 548,000 in 1990. The UK now has 174,000 armed forces, down from 308,000 in 1990. So basically, NATO was reducing and reducing and reducing its presence in Europe. And it's not just one article I'm taking it from. No. I have friends living all over the world, include Europe, and I have the same response from them, that some of them living in Germany or somewhere else near former base of NATO, which is closed. Almost no tanks left at the time in Europe, and they were planning to reduce it more and more and more. So NATO was reducing its presence in Europe. Meanwhile, Russia, as the article says, takes military matters seriously. The Putin regime has increased defense spending 79% over the past decade. According to Brookings study, defense expenditures amounted to 4.5% of Russian GDP in 2012, the World Bank reports. Which is, again, to compare with how much was spent in the United States, it's not that much. But nevertheless, while Russia was increasing spending, NATO was reducing its forces. Up to the point that I seen the videos, and a bunch of NATO generals was kind of saying, Russia has some 40,000 troops at some point and 200,000 at some point on the border with Ukraine in 2014. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? They reduced it that much. They neglected their defense that much that they simply didn't have troops in Europe. And so on. So stories about NATO expansion and that somehow provoked Putin isn't true. NATO cannot tell independent countries what to do. More than that, if NATO would be so bad, why Putin wanted to join NATO? This is RIA Novosti. I showed you that site before. It's official Russian site. Official government Russian site. The article from 3rd of June 2017. Putin told that he discussed with Clinton Russia become a NATO member. And President Vladimir Putin told in an interview to director Oliver Stone, which is Putin's puppet, basically. I really disappointed with Stone. I heard a couple of his interviews about it. It's just disgusting how American citizen, let alone kind of like a journalist, didn't even bother to verify any information. It just swallow hook, line, and sinker anything Putin choose to tell him. Include when Putin showed him on the screen American helicopter and saying it's Russian. He didn't bother to verify any information Putin provided and just swallow Putin's lies and repeated them. He should be under sanctions, in my opinion. But anyways, Putin told to Oliver Stone that he offered Bill Clinton, when he was president of the United States, to look into Russia joining NATO. This is a quote of Putin. I remember one of our last meetings with President Clinton. He came to Moscow. In a discussion, I said that maybe we should consider Russia joining NATO. Clinton said, I don't mind, but his delegation was very nervous, said Putin in an interview, and parts of this interview was published in Politica. Last time Bill Clinton came to Moscow, according to this article, being a president of the United States in June 2000. And NATO wasn't all that happy to have Russia there, because this is why it was existing in the first place, to stop the aggression from USSR and Russia. And now let's talk more closely about Finland. I want to show you some interesting video by Alexander Stubb. He used to be a former prime minister and minister of foreign affairs and famous politician from Finland, who is telling what Finland felt about being under Russia. Finland didn't have too much of a choice. Being on the border with Russia, being a smaller country, they couldn't act as they choose. They had to can always look over the shoulder, see what Russia has to say. This article called Why Mearsheimer is Wrong About Russia and the War in Ukraine. 5 arguments from Alexander Stubb. Mr. Mearsheimer, if I pronounce his name right, and Mr. Chomsky and some other intelligent people said wrong things in the past. And totally wrong. The history just proved them wrong. And yet, every Russian propagandist I ever talked to, all the trolls, bringing up either Mearsheimer or Chomsky every single time. Yet, this is what Mr. Stubb has to say. You can watch his whole video, I really recommend it.
Mearsheimer, like many others in the realist school, believe that Ukraine should subdue. Some talked earlier on in the conflict about the Finlandization of Ukraine, which essentially meant that you had to compromise on your values, on your security, on your politics, and your basic existence in order to achieve peace. I fundamentally disagree with this thesis. And the starting point is very simple. Every independent and sovereign nation state should have the freedom to choose which club it wants to join. This has been put into the UN charters, but more specifically to the Helsinki Accords. It is about international law. It is about sovereignty. It is about independence. It is about the agency for a country like Ukraine to decide its own destiny.
So this is what he has to say about this. And he's right. Independent countries are supposed to decide for themselves. And as he put it later, that basically countries stopped playing a zero-sum game. There is no way that some foreign power, some sort of a superpower, supposed to tell smaller countries how to behave, what to do, what clubs to join. It should not be that way. And Mr. Stubb is right.
I think it's very important that we have these conversations, but I can tell you that I fundamentally and utterly disagree with Mearsheimer on virtually all of his points. Certainly point number 1 on Russia not being able to help itself, point number 2 on Putin making a rational choice, point number 3 that Ukraine should subdue, point number 4 that this is about NATO enlargement, and point number 5 that the EU and the US haven't accommodated Russia enough. Therefore, it was inevitable that Russia attacked. No, it wasn't. This is and will continue to be Russia's and Putin's fault.
And he's correct. This is Putin's aggression and Putin's fault. There is no Russia couldn't help itself. Russia had to defend itself. Nobody attacked Russia. Russia attacked Georgia and took Ossetia and some territories from Georgia. Russia squashed and fought for decades, killing people in Chechnya who didn't want to be with Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine, and I have whole playlist about how it happened with all the proofs you need. How Russian army invaded Crimea in 2014. It wasn't the will of Ukrainian people in Crimea to become Russia. No, it wasn't. And I proved it. It wasn't attack of Ukraine on Russia in any way. It is Russian flag in Crimea, not Ukrainian flag in Belgorod or Rostov. And with Donbass, the same thing. They created so-called Donetsk People Republic and Lugansk People Republic, illegal republics in Donbass by Russian citizens, led by Igor Girkin-Strelkov, FSB officer of Russia, and Russian army forces. But it wasn't enough Russian army forces. There was no regular army in Crimea, in Donbass at the time. That is why they couldn't attach it like Crimea. They couldn't get it. But yet, they created unresolved conflict, which is preventing Ukraine to join NATO. Because by NATO rules, country cannot have unresolved territorial conflict to become a NATO member. And it was part of Putin's goals to create open wound in Ukraine, so Ukraine cannot succeed, and show Russians that freedom and democracy is better than dictatorship, which Ukraine would have, and could have anyways, but that war was continuing for 8 years, prevented Ukraine to succeed, and that's what Putin was afraid. That is why right after Maidan and right after attacking Ukraine, he passed over 17 different laws in Russia, completely and basically eliminating democratic things in Russia. Created the illegal laws which can put people in jail for several different, for absolutely no reason. Like I mentioned to you before, extremism law about extremism, which people had back then 5 years in jail for extremism in internet. Doesn't explain what extremism is. So anything could be extremism. But nevertheless, we can hear from Mr. Stubb, who is Finnish leader, used to be former leader of Finland, and how he feel about being under Russia, being watched over your shoulder all the time, can't do what Finland actually want, and they could not do what they want, because they always have to watch how not upset Russia, because Russia dictated them what to do. Now they choose to join NATO, and they did. And Finland knew they shouldn't trust Putin. That is why they kept their army ready, and it's big, basically, contribution to NATO. According to Mr. Stubb, they have 900,000 troops, and within a few days they can arrange immediately 280,000 people, armed people, troops. They have planes, they have air defense systems, they have lots of military equipment. And if Russia choose to attack Finland instead of Ukraine, Finland on its own could have defeated Russia, most likely, because they have way more weapons than Ukraine and they well more prepared. Because they knew they shouldn't trust Putin. And they didn't. And now they're very glad about joining NATO. Even Sweden didn't really want to join NATO before, and either one of the leaders, Sweden or Finland, said that thanks to Putin, we joined NATO because of Putin. This is another video of Mr. Stubb, Understanding the War in Ukraine, NATO, Russia, Finland, Sweden. This is what he has to say.
And I'm sort of paraphrasing my president, Sauli Niinistö, here. And he says that Finnish NATO membership is about improving security in Finland. It is not against anyone else. And I think that's very important to understand also in Russia. For Finland and for Sweden, security is not a zero-sum game. It is not away from anyone else. So we are witnessing historic times, and it'll be really interesting to see how the path towards NATO membership for Finland and Sweden will evolve?
So it's not because Finland wants to attack Russia. It's because Finland doesn't want Russia attack them as they did in the past. USSR attacked Finland. Finland doesn't want it anymore. Finland wants to be defended. And this is what Article 5 of NATO is about. If one country attacked, everybody else defending them. This is why Finland and Sweden want to join NATO. Not because they want to attack Russia, because they doesn't want that Russia attack them. Now we can see Finnish flag raised in NATO headquarters, as BBC News showing. And congratulations to Finland, and I hope Sweden will be next, because this is what people in Sweden want. They choose to be part of NATO. They didn't do it even during World War II, but now Putin forced them to. And good luck to Sweden, and good luck to Finland. And hopefully Putin will lose soon, before even more people die, which they die every day in Ukraine. Ukrainians, Russians, for no reason but Putin's ambition. Putin must be stopped. Please help Ukraine. Thank you for watching and have a great day.